All right, I just had an athlete absolutely rock out an event this weekend. The Grand Fondo, New York, down in Sebring, Florida. 94 miles of pulse pounding action. It was a great race, and my athlete did fantastic. And the kicker was that this he comes to me as a masters athlete in his 40s, and this was his very first race ever. Yet he rocked it out. There's so many things to learn in a race, and there's so many principles behind every race as a coach and as an athlete. And this is one of the best examples of this seminal quote that Andy Coggan, launched back in the early 2000s, where he says, the best predictor of performance is performance itself. So I have this athlete, and he's been training with me for, maybe, I guess about 6 months, and rocking it out, nailing his consistency, nailing his progression, nailing his rhythm, nailing some epic rides in there in between. And, sort of at the last, on a lark, at the last minute, he wanted to throw in an event for the end of season, just to see how he's going to do. And so, as a new athlete to be in coaching, a new athlete to the science of power, one of the first questions is, well, what's my wattage strategy? Like, what can I do? And so this highlights one of the most fundamental aspects of data, in that, I have all this data from him from 6 months, but again, the best predictor of performance is performance itself. I, as a coach, can make wattage suggestions. I, as a coach, can give real world scenarios out there in training to help get a feel for where you're at, to get a better understanding of who you are as an athlete, of what type of events that, not only are paired to your body, but paired to your mind. And, so we worked together, and we came up with suggestions, based on, his real world training, based on the theory, all the science of power theory that's out there, all that great stuff, all the TSS that he's accumulated, his ATL, his CTL, his TSB, all that great stuff. We can make a suggestion, but again, the best predictor of performance is performance itself. So this athlete gave me some great performance data by which we now can launch his 2024 season. So let's jump into all this great stuff and see what we have to say. So whenever I look at a race, whenever I look at a workout, whenever I look at a race, first thing I always do is I look at the athlete's comments. I had the legs today. I should have pushed more in the last 10 miles. I never stopped, meaning he didn't stop for water. So it's a 94-mile race in Florida. And, if you're in it to win it, if you want to be in the top group, there is no stopping at the water stations or whatever, the aid stations. It's nonstop. So I never stopped, finished with the lead group. If you see my last sprint, I had too much left. Not sure what place I got, but I was up there. Thanks for all the coaching. It was exactly as you said. First 30 minutes were fast, and then it settled down. I was in control and felt prepared for the race. Many thanks. And so, as I'm working with him, we're talking about pacing strategies, the easiest pacing strategy for a group ride race where there is no stopping, there are no segments to race, like in the Grand Fondo segmented races. This is just a straight up 1-day road race for all the glory. The simplest piece of advice is you hang on that wheel in the front, okay? But this was his first race, so we were talking about strategies, all right? So, giving him a strategy, all right? So, like, if your watts at that first 30 minutes are in this range or this range, then you have to make a decision. Do you want to back off to the group behind? Do you want to stay with your current group? Do you want to try to move up a group? There's a lot of decisions that you can be made, which you can better understand through training. You can really understand your watts through training if you've never raced before, which what we did for this particular athlete. All right, so let's jump in. So This is it's wild for me living here in the mountains of Virginia. If I go out and do 100 miles, I'm it's it's because you're going to have about 10,000 feet of climbing. It's going to take 5.5, 6 hours. 5.5 hours would be a great vigorous ride, believe me. But down in Florida, it was flat as could be. So this particular athlete, 3 hours and 44 minutes. He was riding with the fast group. His average speed was 25 miles an hour for the day. He didn't leave an RPE, which was interesting. Distance 95 miles. He had a total TSS of 243. His average watts were 194 and his IF was 81. Now, you'll see up here his CTL for this race. So this is very important for me. So whenever they have a race, and they did great in that race or bad in that race, I really want to understand where they're at in their training. And so again, this athlete is new to me. He's been in me about 6 months. I'm not going to try to cram for the exam here and just blow his CTL up to some artificially high number. We progressed his CTL. So his CTL for this race was really solid. It came through just a really solid progression in training. And so we had a CTL of 78, an ATL of 87, and a training stress balance of 14. I'm going to talk more about that at the very end of this video. So for you data geeks, stay in here because those are 3 very important numbers that I want to know for this particular race. Okay. So here's the course. So it's flat as can be. And, for me in the mountains of Virginia, this would be psychologically, this would be torture to do. There's just not that many terms. So you start here, did this loop twice and come back and finish flat as can be. All right, so here's a great, I always want to look at his, sort of where he was using the energy. All this red means that he was using, this is all above his FTP. This blue is sort of mixed FTP and aerobic. This is sort of, when you're in your tempo, upper tempo, sweet spot, that's what this is. And this was all of his aerobic. But you can see that all of this was how much that he spent in the above FTP. And so, for me as a coach, that might just be how the race, came forward. But since he's new to racing, the biggest thing that I would recommend to him is learn, and it's a very big skill, is learn how to save as much energy riding in a group as possible. The best example of this was Mark Cavendish's 2022 United Kingdom, Great Britain national road race, which he won. So Mark Cavendish always says that the reason he wins the race is that he's not the strongest sprinter out there, is that he always arrives to the finish line the freshest, right? He has a great fatigue resistance that he claims is one of his amazing capabilities, but also his ability to ride as efficiently and economically as possible to get him to that finish line through mountains, through whatever he has to do to get him to that finish line at the very end. And so actually, you can see right here, that's what we're watching right here. That is the 2022 race. What's great about this is that, whenever you see Mark Cavendish race, you never see him race. You just see him in that final sprint. But what's great about this is that he makes that break right off the bat. And so the camera is on him all day for those 9 hours. He wins the race, but you get to see all the millions of ways that he is tucking into the group, that he's not pulling. He's doing everything that he can not to pull. That how aero and efficient he is, how close he is to the rider in front of him, how even though he's in an aero, in a group line, he is crunched down, right? It's a master class. That particular race, I have all my athletes watch it. It is a master class in how to ride a 100-mile race or whatever as efficiently as possible within that lead group, right? So I'll put a link to that. It's on YouTube, and I'll put a link to that down in the show notes, all right? Okay, so what else do we got? So here are his zones. So it looks like a crit. So this is, actually this is called the crit smile. Here's his zone 1. And here's his top level zone, his anaerobic capacity. He has threshold in there, tempo, endurance, VO2. But, he was either not going or going all out. So I, as a coach, what are we going to try to do? We're going to try to get him to bring some of this back by riding more efficiently in the line, the group. Okay, so I always look at his heart rate. So his power trend line. So his power did trend down over the group of the ride. And this is simply because here he is. This is that first 30 minutes of the race. And everything goes out as strong as you can imagine. And he finishes within the group. Here's his heart rate. His heart rate actually goes down now. Nothing to worry about. I always look at the relationship between the heart rate and the power. Because this was more of like a crit scenario, it's hard to get a good indication of it was their cardiac drift or anything of that nature. And I'm not seeing anything red flags. I take this number, 14% cardiac drift, with a big grain of salt, simply because this was just one huge fast group ride where there's tons of surges, you're backing off surge, and so your heart is just all over the place. So no red flags there. I look at it, but I take this data with an extreme grain of salt. Now here's the dynamic functional reserve capacity. Now you can see this looks like a crit. This just looks like a fast group ride. Tons of surges. You can see right off, the gun goes off. Big surge above FTP here. Relax a little bit, come back down. Huge surge right here. This was 1:30, and here's about the hour, and you can just see how this race unfolded. But by the time here, we had our groups pretty much established, but you can see that this type of race was just all out. You're just all out or relaxed. You're all out relaxed, right? And so how do we train for that? That's really important. So when he does this again next year and he wants to up his place, again, this year he got 7th in his age group, 7th out of 38 riders. And I think that out of 600 riders for the day, he was 36th place, which is fantastic for his first race ever. Couldn't be happier. So what are we going to do in the training? So his training will look like this. It will have, some of that fast group ride workouts, or that's the workout. Go out and do some fast group rides. But there's also going to be like, some crit stuff, some VO2 stuff, stuff that we would normally associate with crit type of racing. All right. His cadence, nothing much to see. No real comments with his cadence. Now, so to conclude this whole thing, couldn't be happier for the athlete. And so, kind of things that we're going to work on with this athlete as he moves forward through his 2024 season. More racing. This was his first race, so we want more racing. We've established the baseline, but we need more racing. And again, he had a CTL of 78, an ATL of 87, and a training stress balance of 14. Now, there's been some tons of research, right? So, guys like Tim Cusick have just really crunched the numbers, and they've really, done a great job putting together, looking. Okay, so we have 10,000 athletes. Where are they hitting their PRs? What is their training stress balance when they hit their PRs? And typically it's somewhere between 10 and negative 10. And every individual athlete is different. So when we look at these numbers, his CTL, we're definitely, for next year, we're going to try to have this in the 90s and see how he does with that. And then with the training stress balance, we're going to try to go with a little more towards 0, meaning that we're going to have him come into the race a little bit hotter. Now, again, he's new to me, so I don't cram the exam, the week before a race, I don't say, okay, we got to get you to -10 because the data says that that is a really good place for you to possibly get a PR on the day. I don't do that at all, right? I let the numbers, I shoot for numbers, but I will let those numbers lie where they are. The most important thing is recovery. You just can't keep digging and digging and digging and digging and digging, and fatigue is often the enemy of performance. So I'm really delicate with this. I always use these numbers as a grain of salt, but that's a great baseline starting point, right? So for this next time, we're going to try to shoot for, like a 5 training stress balance, or a 0 training stress balance, or maybe even a -5 training stress balance. All right. More big ring speed work, moto pacing. So, out there, it's all big ring, it's all high cadence. And so, I had dedicated workouts for that big ring, high speed cadence work. We're going to continue with that neuromuscular work and develop those muscles, teach those muscles how to contract at high speeds. And so, 2 ways to do this. You can put out the workout, which is one, go on fast group rides, which he'll have as a workout. So those are 2 different workouts. And then there's moto pacing as well, right? So getting behind and, just cranking out a few hours at 30 miles an hour, a couple hours, at 30 miles an hour, something like that, really to jazz those legs up. But what was great about this athlete, we had prepared him pretty well. He had done some epic rides with groups by himself out there, and he didn't report any signs of cramping or anything like that. So this was all really good. Really super happy with all this. Fatigue resistance, right? We saw that this raced like a crit, all the way through, just this massive group ride where you're having effort after effort after effort all the way to the end. And so that's dedicated fatigue resistance work, where we have dedicated workouts where we have put a ton of stuff at the end, right? Go out for a couple hours of zone 2. That last hour, we're going to put in some tempo blocks, FTP blocks, things like that. Maybe even some VO2 blocks the closer we get to his race. So there's a lot of ways that we can help him be better at this event. And then lastly, economical in terms of just learning how to save as much energy with that group as possible, right? By watching the Mark Cavendish road race, all 9 hours of it, right? Watch it down, take notes. What is Mark Cavendish doing? How is he riding economically? How is he just riding and saving as much energy as possible within the group? And when you watch this and he's in that final break with those riders, he is the best. Like, it's an absolute mastercraft. All right, guys. Grand Fondo, New York, Sebring, Florida. Great race. Really happy with this particular athlete's work. And we'll see you for the next video.